she was curled up on the cold bathroom floor of a high-rise apartment in Manhattan, mascara streaking down her face, the city lights outside mocking her through the rain-speckled window. Leah had spent the last 6 months designing the perfect life, at least that's what her Instagram showed. Daily green smoothies, work sessions until 2 a.m., networking events, a 6-figure dream client. Everything was under control, until suddenly, it her clienta globally know her without warning. The project, months in the making, evaporated overnight. No explanation, no apology, just silence. Leah reread the last email chain dozens of times, dissecting every line, obsessing over what she must have done wrong. Was it the color palette, her tone? Did she sound too eager? Not eager enough? The control she had clung to so tightly, every schedule, every task list, every meditation app shattered. In its place was a kind of silence that felt louder than the city outside. That night, lying on the floor, Leah wasn't just broken. She was confronted with a terrifying truth. Maybe the very thing she had been taught to worship, control, was the thing destroying her. Let that sink in. What if your obsession with controlling life is the very thing keeping you from living it? That was Leah's turning point. And maybe, just maybe, it's yours too. It started small. A friend slid her a worn leather-bound book over coffee, a forgotten name from Roman history, Lucius Falco. Not nearly as famous as Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, but what he wrote would change her life. Freedom, he said, begins where control ends. She read the line over and over, unsure whether to laugh or cry, because deep down, something in her knew it wasn't effort she lacked. It was surrender, but not the kind of surrender that means giving up. This was different. This was fierce, dignified, and quietly radical. The kind that says, I no longer need to force life to go my way, to trust that I'm okay. And when Leah began to surrender, strange things happened. The anxiety that clung to her chest began to loosen. Her ideas, once fogged by panic, began to flow like water. She stopped checking her email every 5 minutes. She slept. She smiled, and eventually, without even trying, the right opportunities returned this time. Without the weight, she called the shift radical presence. Every morning she'd sit still. No scrolling, no planning, no affirmations, just breath and awareness, observing the chaos of her mind without trying to fix it. She wasn't meditating. She was remembering who she was without the noise. That's what the Stoics understood so profoundly. We suffer not because life is cruel, but because we believe it should be different. We grip outcomes, we chase certainty, and in doing so, we miss the extraordinary peace that only comes when you stop demanding life to be something it's not. Leah didn't abandon ambition. She abandoned attachment. And in that space, creativity was reborn. She designed her best work, not under pressure, but in flow. She laughed deeper, loved cleaner, and let go quicker. Then came the email from a boutique hotel in Lisbon. They wanted her. No pitch, no pursuit, just alignment. Letting go didn't mean she lost her edge. It meant she finally found her center. If you're tired of chasing, forcing and pushing, if your dreams feel more like chains than wings, this story is your invitation to let go. Not to fall, but to rise without resistance. And trust me, this is only the beginning of Leah's story. If this opening hits something inside you, if it cracked open a truth you've been too afraid to admit, then do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button. It takes less than a second, but it fuels us to keep creating these stories that might just change how you see your entire life. Now, let me ask you this. Drop your answer in the comments below. If life takes an unexpected turn, what do you tend to do? A. Try to fix or control the outcome immediately. B. Step back and reassess what's truly in your control. Comment your answer below. A or B. I want to know how many of you are still gripping the wheel and how many are learning. to let go. 3 weeks after the breakdown, Leah stepped off a dusty shuttle in Sedona, Arizona, squinting at the red rock cliffs rising like ancient guardians under the blazing sun. The air felt different, here thinner, quieter, like it demanded you drop your defenses or be swallowed by your own noise. She had booked a retreat on a whim, or at least that's what she told herself. But somewhere deep down, she knew it wasn't impulse, it was instinct. Something in her was ready to shift. The retreat center was simple. No luxury, no pretenses. Just bare rooms, floor cushions, and long stretches of silence. The facilitator, a weathered man named Elias with gray-streaked hair and desert-worn hands, didn't begin with meditation or breath work. Instead, he asked a question that disarmed everyone in the room. What are you pretending to control that is not yours to hold? The question haunted Leah through the evening. That night, under a sky littered with stars, she wrote the answer. Other people's timelines, their opinions, my own worth. It wasn't a list. It was a confession. The next morning, during a sunrise hike up Bell Rock, Elias shared a quote from a philosopher Leah had never heard of. Justice Aurelius. He said, "You are not what happens to you, but how you respond to it." Leah froze when she heard it. All her life she had carried the belief that outcomes defined her, that if something went wrong, it meant she had gone wrong. But what if that wasn't true? What if she could separate her identity from the chaos around her? For the first time, she considered that clarity wasn't something to be achieved through strategy, but something remembered through silence. Later that day, Elias introduced the practice of detachment journaling. The instructions were simple. List 5 things outside your control and 5 things within it. Leah was surprised by how much emotion poured out. Outside her control, clients, feedback, career timing, her ex's silence, her father's pride, the economy. Inside her control, her work ethic, her design voice, her breath, her sleep, her integrity. It felt like her power had been hiding in plain sight. She hadn't been powerless, she had just been placing her energy in the wrong places. Her stress hadn't come from doing too little, it had come from doing too much, where it didn't matter. As the days passed, Leah's relationship with control began to unravel. She stopped checking her phone. She no longer needed to perform calm. She began to feel it. Her mind, once a battleground of what-ifs and to-dos, started to soften. Her thoughts came slower, her movements more deliberate. She wasn't checking out of life, she was finally checking in. That's what the Stoics meant by clarity. Not knowing everything, but seeing what matters. Modern psychology calls it cognitive reappraisal. The ability to shift your interpretation of events to change how you feel. The Stoics didn't need that term, they just lived it. Epictetus taught that it's not the events themselves that disturb us, but the stories we tell about them. Leah had been telling herself the same story for years. If I don't succeed fast enough, I'm falling behind. But in Sedona, that story unraveled. She saw a different truth. Growth isn't a sprint. It's a slow unfolding, a dismantling, a becoming. Elias said something during their last session that Leah wrote in the front of her notebook. Peace isn't the absence of action, it's the presence of aligned action. That hit her harder than any motivational quote she'd ever posted. Because for years, her action had been driven by fear of failure, of insignificance, of being left behind. Now, she saw a new way forward. Not chasing, but choosing. Not grasping, but grounding. On her flight back to New York, Leah didn't feel like she was returning to the same life. The city would still buzz. Deadlines would still loom. But she wasn't the same woman walking back into it. She had let go of the illusion of control, and, in doing so, found the quiet truth underneath. She didn't need to control everything to create something extraordinary. She just needed to be clear about what was hers, what wasn't, and who she wanted to be, in the space between. Leah hadn't expected love to re-enter her life so quietly. No fireworks, no sweeping gestures, just a familiar face across a bookstore aisle in Brooklyn, and a hesitant smile that said, "It's been a while." His name was Julian. They had once shared a brief spark, years ago, during a design conference in Chicago. It had ended before it began, their paths too tangled in personal ambition. But this time, there was space. For a few weeks, everything felt light. Conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter and warmth. Leah allowed herself to hope, to imagine what it might mean to build something real. But as the connection deepened, so did something darker, an old ache that stirred beneath her ribs. It started with small fears. What if he stops texting back? What if he's not as invested? What if this ends like before? One night, after Julian canceled dinner last minute, Leah spiraled. Her mind flooded with stories. He's losing interest. I did something wrong. I'm not enough. She didn't sleep. The next morning, exhausted and on edge, she brought it up with her therapist. Her therapist didn't try to soothe her. Instead, she asked one simple question. Are you responding to reality or reacting to fear? Leah sat in silence. It was a question that split her open. She went home that night and wrote in her journal, without stopping, I'm not scared he'll leave. I'm scared I won't survive it if he does. And beneath that, I try to prove my worth before anyone can doubt it. That kind of honesty hurt, but it also healed. The Stoics taught that real peace doesn't come from controlling others or eliminating uncertainty, comes from mastering the self. Tallies of Delos, a voice Leah had come across in her post-retreat readings, once wrote, to master others is strength. To master oneself is peace. She read that line every morning for a week. It became her mirror. Leah began a practice she called evening mental resets. No screens, no distractions. Just 30 minutes to be with her thoughts, whatever they were. Some nights, she wrote letters she never sent, letters to her younger self, to people who had hurt her, even to Julian. Other nights, she walked the quiet streets of her neighborhood, letting her feelings surface like waves rising and falling without judgment. She learned something she had never been taught. Emotional alchemy isn't about suppressing pain. It's about giving it the space to transform. The very fears she had once tried to outrun were now her teachers. Her anxiety wasn't a flaw, was a signal, a message from the parts of herself still healing. As the weeks went on, Leah's relationship with Julian evolved, not into a grand love story, but into something even more valuable, a mirror. They cared for each other, but they were walking different paths. When they sat down one afternoon in a quiet coffee shop and decided to part ways, Leah didn't fall apart. She didn't beg or collapse into old patterns of proving or pleasing. She simply thanked him for his presence, for what they learned, for what they shared. When she got home, she cried, but it was a clean kind of sadness, not the panic-fueled despair she used to know. She didn't feel broken. She felt expanded. That night, as she watched the city lights flicker from her window, she realized something profound. Inner peace doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop fearing your feelings. You trust that your sadness won't drown you, that your fear won't define you, that even heartbreak can be held with grace. And more than that, she understood that letting go of someone doesn't mean love failed, means it served its purpose. Emotional mastery, she realized, wasn't about being unshakable. It was about being willing to shake and still stay grounded, about knowing your worth isn't tethered to who stays or leaves. She returned to her journal, flipping back through pages filled with longing, fear, hope, and truth. And at the top of a new page, she wrote, "This is what becoming looks like." The Stoics believed that every emotional storm holds the potential for deeper wisdom. Leah wasn't finished learning, but now, she was no longer afraid of what the learning might cost. She had discovered the alchemy of turning pain into peace, not by avoiding it, but by walking straight through it. Leah didn't move to Venice Beach for the ocean. She moved for the air, the kind that smelled of salt and eucalyptus. the kind that slowed your heartbeat without asking permission. After years of climbing ladders and chasing deadlines in New York, she didn't need more ambition. She needed room to breathe. At first, the silence felt unfamiliar. There were no clients demanding last-minute changes. No subway screeches interrupting her thoughts. No social pressures telling her what success should look like. Just mornings filled with sunlight and stillness. The kind of space where things either heal or unravel. For Leah, it was both. She began walking to a small local cafe each morning, journal in hand. Not to plan or strategize, but simply to be. She noticed things she used to miss, the rhythm of palm trees swaying in the wind, the quiet kindness in strangers' nods, the way light shifted on the sidewalk at 9 a.m. It was the first time in her adult life that she wasn't trying to get somewhere faster. One morning, as she sipped her coffee in the back garden of the cafe, she came across a quote taped to the wall beside her table. It was from Darian Epictetus, a modern interpreter of Stoic principles. True wealth is not in what we have, but in what we no longer crave. Leah stared at it, heart caught in her throat. Because deep down, she knew she had spent years craving the wrong things. Validation, recognition, certainty, and now, sitting barefoot in a garden with nothing urgent to prove, she realized how much lighter life felt without that hunger. She didn't stop working. She didn't give up her dreams. But she shifted her energy completely. Instead of asking, how do I get more? She began asking, what if I already have enough? And the world, strangely, began responding. Clients started reaching out, again this time not because she chased them, but because her work resonated with clarity. Collaborators seemed to appear out of nowhere. She got invited to speak at a small creative gathering in Ojai, where she met designers who felt like kindred spirits. Nothing felt forced. Everything felt aligned. And that's when she understood abundance not as something to gain, but something to return to. She created a new practice for herself called slow mornings. No screens, no urgency, just movement, intention, and presence. Some days she read poetry. Other days she drew, without agenda. On Sundays, she visited the farmer's market not just for food, but for connection. She started smiling at strangers again. Not out of politeness, but out of joy. Something else began to shift to her inner dialogue. The voice that once whispered, "You're falling behind," began to lose power. It was replaced with a quieter, truer one. "You're exactly where you need to be." The Stoics taught that the quality of your life depends not on your circumstances, but on your perception. Abundance isn't about accumulation. It's about attention where it goes, what it magnifies. Leah no longer measured her worth by her output. She measured it by her presence. One afternoon, she was sketching by the beach when a young woman approached her. "I follow your work," she said. "It feels different, like calmer. I don't know how to explain it." Leah smiled. She did know? The difference wasn't in her technique. It was in her energy. She wasn't creating from pressure anymore. She was creating from peace. Leah began to notice how people responded to that shift. Conversations were deeper. Connections were more organic. She no longer felt the need to impress or outperform. And somehow, that's exactly what made her magnetic. She journaled one line that day: "I no longer chase. I attract what aligns." It wasn't a mantra. It was a lived truth. Living in abundance didn't mean Leah never had doubts or setbacks. But those moments no longer defined her. She had learned to trust that even in stillness, life was working on her behalf. And perhaps the most beautiful realization was this: the things she thought she needed to be worthy, perfect timing, flawless outcomes, constant momentum were never what made her powerful. Her power came from her presence, her openness, and her willingness to live gently, yet with purpose. Abundance, she learned, isn't a finish line, it's a frequency. And once you start living in that frequency, everything changes, not because you finally controlled the world, but because you finally came home to yourself. The invitation came in an email with the subject line, "We'd love to feature your work." It was from a contemporary art gallery in Austin, Texas. They were curating a summer exhibition focused on emerging female designers who blended form with emotion, and they wanted Leah. A few years ago, she would have lost sleep over this. Her mind would have gone into overdrive. What if I'm not ready? What if I mess it up? She would have triple-checked every design, over-prepared every talking point, overthought every inch of how she might be perceived. But not this time. Leah didn't panic. She paused. She took a slow breath and whispered to herself, "Yes, and I trust myself to rise to it." There was no scrambling, no frantic energy, no need to prove. Instead, she moved with a quiet kind of certainty, one that had taken years to earn. She created a daily ritual she called her power hour of alignment. Each morning before diving into any task, she set a timer for 60 minutes. During that hour, there was no email, no social media, no external input, just her and her internal compass. Sometimes she meditated, sometimes she journaled, other times she walked barefoot through the backyard of her rented bungalow, sipping coffee and watching how the light hit the cactus spines. It wasn't about productivity. It was about returning to the question, why am I doing this? And when the answer came, because this work is who I am, it grounded her more deeply than any outcome ever could. That was the difference between the Leah of now and the Leah of then. She no longer moved out of fear. She moved from clarity. She had stopped asking, what if it doesn't work? And started asking, what's trying to emerge through me? The Stoic philosopher Seneca Calidus once wrote, "Force creates resistance. Alignment invites flow." Leah saw the truth in that line everywhere she looked. The more she relaxed into her purpose, the more naturally her path unfolded. The pieces came together not because she forced them, but because she stayed connected to her. Why? This exhibit wasn't just about showcasing her work, it was about revealing her evolution. Every piece she created held a part of her story, the one that had lived through pressure and panic and emerged with softness and strength. Still, there were moments of doubt. There always are. The night before the gallery opening, she stood in the space alone, looking at her installations lit under soft golden light. Her stomach turned slightly. What if people don't get it? But then, almost reflexively, her breath slowed. She placed her hand over her chest and said quietly, "It's not my job to control their reaction. It's my job to offer truth." And just like that, the weight lifted. That evening, as guests filtered through the gallery, she stood not as someone waiting for approval, but as someone willing to be seen. And they did see her. A stranger approached and said, "Your piece made me cry. It felt like you were telling my story." Leah didn't respond with rehearsed gratitude. She just nodded, heart full. Because it wasn't about the applause, it was about resonance. That night, walking back to her Airbnb, under the wide Texas sky, Leah reflected on something she had written months before. "I no longer chase. I attract what aligns." She smiled, because now, she wasn't just attracting opportunities, she was aligning with them. There is a unique power in moving with intention, rather than panic. It's not passive, it's potent. It's not slow, it's sustainable. And the more Leah embodied it, the more life began to meet her with that same steady rhythm. She had learned to recognize the difference between urgency and calling. Urgency screamed, calling whispered. And every morning she chose to listen to that whisper. She moved one step closer to a life that didn't just look good, but felt right. Panic may once have been her fuel, but now, purpose was her fire. And it burned brighter, steadier, and far more beautifully than she ever imagined. Leah stood at the summit of Half Dome just before dusk, her fingers numb from the climb, her lungs full of thin mountain air. The vastness that unfolded around her was almost impossible to take in. The granite cliffs bathed in amber light, the distant snowcaps glowing like ghosted memories. It was as if the whole world had gone silent just to let her listen. She didn't take a photo. She didn't record a video. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to prove and nowhere to post. She just stood there, letting the stillness settle inside her like snow. It had been nearly a year since the unraveling began. A year of letting go, of losing and reclaiming parts of herself she hadn't even realized were missing. And now, in the stillness of that moment, she finally understood what all of it had been leading to. This was never about building a perfect life. It was about learning how to live. The Stoics spoke often of fate not as something to fear, but as something to accept with grace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you, woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs?" Leah had read that line dozens of times, but only now, in this altitude silence, did it fully land. Stillness wasn't absence. It was presence, undiluted and whole. And it had taken her a lifetime to reach it, as she sat on the edge of the summit. Legs dangling over stone worn smooth by time, she thought about everything that hadn't gone as planned. The client she lost, the love that didn't last, the years spent overworking, overthinking, overcompensating. None of it had broken her. It had refined her. She remembered something Elias had once said during the retreat in Sedona. Manifestation doesn't happen when you clench. It happens when you soften. She didn't fully understand it then, but now she did. You don't manifest what you desperately chase. You manifest what you're in harmony with, and harmony cannot exist without presence. Leah began practicing what she called manifestation without demand. It wasn't about vision boards or affirmations. It was about trust, deep, cellular level trust, that if she lived with integrity, if she showed up fully and honestly, the right people, the right paths, the right timing would find her, and they did. Since her show in Austin, doors had opened, partnerships, clients, creative invitations she once only dreamed about. But more importantly, something within had settled. The craving had quieted. The measuring had stopped. She no longer needed external validation to feel valuable. She no longer feared silence or solitude. In fact, she craved it, because that was where clarity lived. That was where life whispered its next right step, not in the noise of strategy, but in the hush of awareness. On the hike down from the summit, Leah moved slowly, not because she was tired, but because she didn't want to leave too fast. She stopped often, sometimes to drink water, sometimes just to feel the earth under her boots. There was a presence in her body she hadn't known before. She wasn't rushing anymore. She wasn't chasing the next moment. She was in this one. That night, in her cabin nestled at the base of the mountain, she lit a single candle and wrote in her journal, "I no longer live to get somewhere. I live to be here." That simple sentence felt like a full circle. The journey had been long, not in miles, but in layers of conditioning, fear, pressure, and pretense. And with each layer she peeled back, she found more of herself. Not a new version, not a better one, just the real one. The one who had always been waiting beneath the noise. This was the art of stillness. Not a withdrawal from life, but a deeper engagement with it. A recognition that true manifestation is not about force, it's about alignment, about being so rooted in who you are that the right things can't help but find you. And that was Leah's truth now. She didn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't need to grasp to be held. She didn't need to chase to be chosen. She just needed to be fully, undeniably, and unapologetically present. And from that presence, everything began to unfold. Not perfectly, not predictably, but beautifully, and exactly as it should. Leah's story began with a simple desire to succeed, to be seen, to feel like she was enough. Like so many of us, she believed the path to fulfillment was paved with hustle, perfection, and control. She chased opportunities with a white-knuckled grip, built her life around validation, and poured herself into outcomes that were never really hers to command. But life has a way of teaching us in whispers, then in storms. When her career plans unraveled, when love slipped through her fingers, when the mask of having it all together cracked, Leah was left with one truth staring her in the face. Everything she had been doing to feel powerful was actually making her powerless. And that's where her real journey began, not in some dramatic transformation, but in a quiet decision to stop clenching and start listening. From the mountains of Sedona to the beaches of California, from heartbreak to creative rebirth, from anxiety to presence, Leah stopped trying to force her life into a perfect picture and started aligning with who she truly was. She let go of the illusion that more effort meant more worth. She released the fear that if she didn't chase things down, they wouldn't come. And in that letting go, everything started to align. Her career evolved not because she worked harder, but because her work now flowed from authenticity. Her relationships deepened not because she needed them, but because she no longer feared being alone. Her mind quieted not because life became easy, but because she became anchored. Stillness became her superpower. Clarity replaced urgency, purpose replaced panic, and life, in all its unpredictability, began to feel less like a battle and more like a dance. So what's the deeper message here? It's this: real strength isn't found in control. It's found in alignment, in learning to trust that what's meant for you will not pass you by, and that your most powerful energy is not frantic striving, but calm, intentional presence. This story isn't just about Leah, it's about all of us. We live in a world that screams, do more, be more, get more. But what if the answer isn't more? What if it's less? Less force, less fear, less proving. What if everything you're chasing is actually waiting for you, not at the finish line, but in the stillness of this very moment? Here's how to apply this to your own life. Start by asking yourself, where am I gripping too tightly? What expectations, outcomes, or timelines am I trying to force? Then, shift the question. What would it feel like to move from clarity instead of fear? To act from alignment rather than anxiety? You don't need to quit your job, move to the mountains, or become someone entirely different. You just need to start tuning into the energy behind your actions. Ask yourself not just what you're doing, but why. Because when you move with purpose instead of panic, life meets you differently. It begins to unfold in ways you never imagined, ways that feel lighter, freer, and more deeply true. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which part of Leah's story spoke to you the most? Where in your own life are you being invited to let go and trust? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's learn from each other. You never know who your insight might help. And if this message resonated with you even just a little, please hit that subscribe button. It takes just a second, but it gives us the energy and support to keep creating more content like this. Stories with meaning, lessons with depth, and reminders that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is be still. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next one.